Good morning, Dan and Amy. And the Wall Street Journal opining on the matter of a special counsel for Hunter Biden. This the argument that carries forward against the backdrop of Attorney General Barr announcing that he will leave office on December 23rd, his resignation as Attorney General. But he has already designated John Durham special counsel. And so the question is whether or not there's enough faith that John Durham can complete investigations that both include an assessment of everything that transpired from 2016 forward in the area of Russian collusion and the activity of the intelligence and law enforcement agencies at the federal level, combined with his apparent investigation into Hunter Biden that was opened up with respect to his tax affairs. Hunter Biden concedes, but probably significantly more wide-ranging than that, thanks to Hunter Biden's willy-nilly distribution of laptops all over the place that have been requisitioned by the federal government. And again, though, that doesn't mean that this is a story. Alex Shepard, writing the New Republic, sorry, the Hunter Biden story is still not a thing. Not a thing. We're, even with Hunter Biden's acknowledgement that he's under federal investigation, even with emails that seem to indicate Joe Biden, the big guy, was not telling the truth when he said he had no idea what Hunter Biden was doing in these various foreign theaters, even with emails where Hunter Biden is asking for keys to be made to a D.C. office for the big guy, for his brother, for some emissary for the communist-backed Chinese energy company that paid him $5 million, even with emails from another business partner about $400,000 in unreported income in one tax year from Burisma, even with the documentation provided by former business partner Tony Bobolinsky and the perspective he gave to Tucker Carlson before the election. There's really nothing to see here, not yet, says one of the papers of outlets of record for the left. It's not a thing, To get perhaps a different perspective on whether it's a thing or not, we're pleased to be joined again by David Harsanyi. He is senior writer for National Review, author of First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun, From the Revolution to Today. David, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
So you have to applaud the intransigence of the left. They have a very high standard with respect to their own when it comes to something turning into a thing in the area of federal law enforcement.
I mean, I don't know if people remember, but I think it was a few days before the Post wrote their Hunter Biden first piece. The big story was that the First Lady had complained about putting up Christmas decorations on a secretly recorded tape, which no one could verify, but put on CNN, for a 24-hour loop itself before suppressing this story about potentially the front-running candidate for the U.S. presidency being involved in kind of shady dealing. So it's a weird and slippery definition of what's newsworthy and what's not.
And with respect to the question of Attorney General Barr's handling of the whole matter, I mean, there's so much we don't know about why he was unable to fulfill his promise that the American people would know what happened 2016 forward before November 3rd. That didn't happen because the Durham investigation hasn't been completed, and we don't necessarily know the full scope of why or where Durham is going. But I mean, do you see that as a failure, or do you see that as just exigent circumstances between COVID impeding the Durham investigation, as Barr said, and this whole other avenue that was opened up by all things Hunter Biden related?
I guess we need to know more before I can say if he did a good job in that area or not. And generally, I like him. I think he's pretty straightforward. But I do have a bit of a problem with this idea that the American people, that he actively and ensured that the American people wouldn't hear more about the Hunter Biden investigation. I know that wouldn't have happened had the roles been reversed as far as the parties go. But moreover, I just don't understand why. I think that's lending favors to people in power. I think also that the American people deserve to know that the family, that there's evidence, not just that the family, but the candidate himself might be involved in shady dealings, and that there's an investigation going on. It doesn't mean that anyone's guilty, but this idea that we have to coddle the American voter and that they shouldn't hear certain things or et cetera is really kind of destructive because it lends itself to corruption.
Well, let me play devil's advocate on that. In one respect, the American people did know because it was reported by the New York Post and picked up by other outlets too. Obviously, it was not picked up by the D.C. press corps because they're the comm shop for Biden and the left. But it was out there. It was we were discussing it prior to the election. There was even the information about subpoenas having been issued in 2018 in stories that were run before the election. And number two, there is this protocol at Justice to not comment on ongoing investigations. And I think there's good reason for that. So you don't slime people that may be a target of an investigation who never turn out to be charged with anything and negatively impact their reputation publicly. If he would have done that, wouldn't he have not been in the same position as Jim Comey and subject to the same criticism?
Yeah, I think Jim Comey did the right thing actually in regards to Hillary. Well, not actually. I think he saved Hillary, and it backfired on him. But because there was a presidential candidate, he tried to, or pretended to try to, be forthcoming about what the FBI was up to and doing during the election. I don't. As I preface that comment, I'm not exactly sure what went on, but I just don't understand why the son of the presidential candidate deserves a special treatment where, listen, you can, how far does it extend to the cousins, to the brother, to who? I don't know. I don't exactly understand how the protocol is used and stuff like that. So I shouldn't say definitively. I just feel like it's a weird exception that's made for people in power that should be made for others.
Well, I can understand why people would be confused and why a lot of people hold the same view that you do, because the protocol is sometimes abided and sometimes not. If it were abided categorically, including by previous FBI directors and attorneys general, then maybe the line would be a little bit brighter. That we don't comment on things and like that because we are in the business of not only protecting the integrity of the investigation from politics as best we can, but also protecting the reputation of people who are at this point are just subjects of, not charged with anything. And I think.
Well, look, can I just quickly say one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
The problem with all of that is that you get to say things, you get to go on TV and call something Russian disinformation, and while the FBI doesn't, I believe actually maybe they had debunk that, but you get to say things that simply aren't true about investigations of people, and it's misleading in its own way. So I don't really know how the FBI or the Justice Department can handle that, but it just seemed like that's not the kind of principled action that would have been taken by a DOJ of Biden, or certainly not Obama.
No question.
But anyway,
no question.
Well, has anybody gotten to his taxes are under federal investigation from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware, and he and his ex-wife had a $112,000 tax lien on their house. Does this have anything to do with that?
Well, I don't know.
Or it could
what
be
do
something
you mean?
worse.
Just to cover? You see, my whole, just to quickly take a step back, my whole problem with this isn't really the DOJ. It's the media, which which should be following these stories. They should have, and they do have, sources within the DOJ who would let them know if these investigations existed. They would let them know the question you just asked. They would let them know if that was true. And that's why we have reporters. We don't have now. We have reporters suppressing stories, and I think that's the main. That's the big takeaway here on the Hunter Biden thing for now.
Yeah, and the New York Post did the story, and then Twitter took it down. I mean, they had to fight to get it back on social media. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that was a active way to try to win the election for Joe Biden. If they didn't want a repeat of the Hillary, story, and so they decided they were just going to suppress a story, and that's what they did. There were more process stories about the New York Post newsroom writing the Hunter story than there was on Hunter. And you assume that people at the New York Times and Washington Post have sources in the DOJ who can let them know if an investigation is going on or not.
Yeah, and this is just supposition on my part, but I wonder how much what has just been released this week plays into this as well. This data leak from the Chinese communists of a couple of million worth of communist Chinese, Communist Party Chinese who are in good standing with the party that are dispatched all over the West, including to be Eric Swalwell's girlfriend, apparently. And thinking about how compromised this administration could be as part of this larger play that China is making. I mean, you start to really get into something that's much bigger than just trying to line your pockets, like potentially this data leak implicates. And this could be a lot more far-ranging than even we think at this point, focused on the Biden family.
Yeah, and it's just so the hypocrisy of the coverage, considering what we went through with Russia, et cetera. There's a ton more evidence that the Biden family and probably the Biden administration could be compromised by some kind of Chinese. I'm not saying it's true or not, but that could be compromised by the Chinese because they had business dealings with them that there were of Donald Trump, colluding with Russia, criminally colluding with Russia in any way. So that hypocrisy probably drives people crazy as well.
But to be fair, I mean, the D.C. press corps that's not focused on this Biden story is focused on another Biden story, and that is whether or not Jill Biden should be called doctor or not. And so this is something they are focused on and devoting resources to. So they're not completely ignoring the Biden family.
It drives me crazy, as I've tweeted this out, but the only people I call doctor are people who can prescribe me morphine or Dr. J. And other than that, I'm not going to call you doctor. I feel like it's pretentious. Now,
would you,
I just quickly want to say that's not.
Hold on. Would you also refer to Dwight Gooden as Dr. K?
No, because I'm a Yankees fan. But actually, yeah. Well, he won a series with the Yankees too, so maybe.
All right. Well,
I'll think about that. I mean, there are exceptions, but not for education degrees. No offense to anyone who has one, but I just don't think I think it's just credentialism, basically, to force people to call you a doctor when you have that sort of degree.
Do you see the rallying around Jill Biden and the relegating Joe Epstein to the gulag? The Northwestern scrubbing his name from their website immediately, and all the calls of misogyny, and deep thinkers like Graham Wood at the Atlantic telling us that docere means to from the Latin word from which doctorate derives means to teach, and she's a teacher. And so, I mean, do you find that all very compelling? Do you? And also here instructive, like Paul Gigot mentioned, it's instructive that they swarmed like jackals on this story because it was an opportunity to sort of flex their identitarian muscles.
It's crazy the things that really get them their juices going. I think that it was a funny column, and I think that was he like 80-something years old? I think so. He used the word kiddo, which maybe they should have scrubbed that word, but obviously he was being, he was being funny. It was a good column. It was well written. It was provocative, and that's what you're supposed to do when you write a column. And I agree with them. I mean, I know a lot of people with advanced degrees, and none of them has ever asked me to call them a doctor unless they're an actual doctor, and even them I don't call a doctor. So I just find the whole thing very funny, and the idea that someone is diminishing her accomplishments. And no offense, but her accomplishments are like the accomplishments of someone who's a great plumber or who's a great, something else. I find it weird, and I think it grates. This is going to be a bit much on this, but I think it grates against sort of egalitarian ideals of America that some people with credentials should be, lifted above the rest of us, especially when they have that sort of degree.
Absolutely, you're right. I would go one further. We're not denigrating Jill Biden's credential. We're denigrating every doctorate in education's credential. So how's that for egalitarianism? A friend of ours here at the show, Gene Kroom, who's the president of Judson University in suburban Chicago, he always talks about he's a doctor in some academic subject, and he always talks about how his dad introduces him. Yeah, this is my son, the doctor, but he's not the kind of doctor that can help anybody. And and that's exactly how it should be viewed with Jill Biden or me with the Juris Doctorate. It's ridiculous. It's obscene, and it's just that sort of projecting elitism, like I'm a member of the Vanguard class. Absolutely, people.
Yeah,
should be
all
taking
of
that
a sudden
away.
they're like, in the 1500s, philosophers were called doctors. That's how it began. Okay, now you want now you want to go back to the 1500s.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
so funny. The
All
norms
these
of
deep
American life
thinkers.
say that. Yeah, exactly. The norms of American life say that I don't have to call anyone a doctor if I don't want to, who does, isn't a doctor. And Jill Biden, I'm sorry. I mean, when you look into that degree, incidentally, it's kind of like, it's not, I'm sure a lot of 55-year-old women would like to go back to school and, just keep going to school and add letters to their name, but they don't have the money or the time. And she did, and that's great, but it's not super great. It just is.
I'll leave it there before you get yourself in more trouble and banished
Yeah.
by the enlightened class to some corner of the academic.
There are only like
world.
2 places I can work already, so
Yeah, there you go. Right.
in American journalism, right? Yeah.
David Harsanyi, senior writer at National Review, author of the book First Freedom: A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Harsanyi.
Thank you, sir.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.